always thought I had a good handle on our marriage. Emily and I had been together for 12 years, long enough to know each other's moods, long enough to feel comfortable without trying too hard, long enough to assume we'd face the world together without drama. Or at least that's what I thought. It was a Friday night, and her company was hosting its annual holiday party. She'd been talking about it all week, excited to see colleagues she rarely got to meet in person. I didn't mind going, mostly because she insisted. I had a simple rule: smile, make polite conversation, and keep my own glass full. But as I dressed that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Emily had been different lately. Not distant exactly, but quiet in a way that made my stomach tighten. When we arrived, the venue in downtown Seattle was buzzing with laughter and the soft clinking of glasses. Emily immediately gravitated toward her coworkers, leaving me to hang back by the bar. She turned back, smiled, just a polite curve of her lips, and said, "Just pretend we're friends tonight." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Friends. After 12 years, after all we'd been through, she wanted me to act like a stranger beside her. She didn't mean it unkindly. I knew that much. It was a passing joke, a casual way to distance herself in front of her colleagues. But in that moment I felt a sharp clarity. The warmth, the intimacy, the little signs that once tethered us together. They were fading. I nodded and said, "All right, friends it is." And then I saw her boss, Ms. Bennett, tall, composed, a bit aloof, the kind of woman who commanded a room without raising her voice. Emily had mentioned her many times. Professional, exacting, always polite, but impossible to impress. I'd only met her once, briefly, at an office gathering, and she had left an impression not unlike Emily herself in the early days. Confident, self-assured, slightly untouchable. I made my way over. The idea, irrational though it may have been, struck me almost like instinct. If I had to sit in the shadow of Emily's indifference, I might as well sit beside someone who actually noticed me. Ms. Bennett's smile was small when I introduced myself. "You must be Emily's husband," she said, her tone polite but probing. There was curiosity in her eyes, not judgment, just awareness. That alone was a relief. We started talking about work, about the city, about trivial things that normally wouldn't matter. But her attention was unforced. She didn't glance at her phone every 2 minutes. She didn't constantly scan the room. She listened. I realized I hadn't felt that kind of simple, patient attention in months, maybe even years. Meanwhile, Emily drifted in and out of the conversation, offering occasional smiles but never fully present. Every time she did, I felt a flicker of disappointment, the kind that's subtle at first, then sharp enough to twist your chest. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on Ms. Bennett's easy conversation and the warmth in her laugh. At one point, Emily leaned over and whispered, "Are you enjoying yourself?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine," I said. And in that single word, I felt the truth settle uncomfortably. Fine wasn't enough. Not for me. Not for her. Not for the space we'd once shared and that had now become foreign. The night stretched on. Drinks flowed. People laughed. And I sat there laughing politely at jokes that weren't quite mine. Yet beside me, Ms. Bennett's attention didn't waver. She asked questions I actually wanted to answer, and when I spoke she listened. It felt almost like a mirror reflecting back the man I used to be. Confident, appreciated, valued. Emily across the room didn't notice the change. Or maybe she did and it didn't matter. I couldn't read her thoughts anymore. The warmth we used to share had turned distant, polite, transactional. And in that silence I realized something. I hadn't been truly seen in a long time. Not at home, not in conversation, not in any of the subtle ways that make a marriage feel alive. By the end of the party I felt a strange clarity. Sitting beside someone who genuinely paid attention made me see the truth that had been hovering for months. I wasn't invisible because I had changed. I was invisible because she had stopped seeing me. And if that was the reality we lived in, maybe it was time to stop pretending everything was fine. As the party wound down, I realized I hadn't spent a single moment worrying about Emily's reaction. I hadn't rehearsed smiles. I hadn't fumbled for things to say. I had just existed in the conversation and it felt like freedom. Ms. Bennett excused herself for a few minutes. In her absence, I felt an unexpected sense of calm, as if the weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had lifted slightly. When she returned, she brought me another drink and asked casually, "So, how long have you been in construction?" I laughed, told her the story of my first job straight out of college, and she listened intently, nodding along. The conversation was effortless, natural, and most importantly reciprocal. No awkward silences, no cold disinterest. I could feel myself relax in a way I hadn't around Emily in years. Then Emily approached. She was smiling again, but it felt different now. A little strained, a little tentative. "I see you two are getting along," she said, her voice light, trying to mask something beneath. I looked up at her and nodded, giving nothing more. The truth was I didn't feel guilty. Sitting beside Ms. Bennett, being listened to and respected, had reminded me what it felt like to matter to someone. For the first time in months, maybe years, I realized I could exist without constantly seeking approval from Emily. The drive home along the rainy streets of Seattle was quiet. Emily chatted lightly about the night's highlights, her voice carrying a casual cheer that no longer included me in the way it used to. I didn't answer much, and she noticed. I could tell by the way she glanced at me in the rearview mirror, searching for something, connection perhaps, or reassurance, but finding none. That night at home, I lay awake in the bed we'd shared for over a decade. The room felt familiar yet foreign. Emily had gone to sleep on her side, curled up with her phone, scrolling quietly. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the conversation at the party, about the laughter that had felt genuine, about the simple act of being truly noticed. It wasn't romantic in a grand way. There were no fireworks, no dramatic confessions. It was just clarity. In the following days, something began to shift in me. I started noticing the subtle ways I had been compromising, the little sacrifices that had gone unacknowledged. I realized I had spent so much time trying to maintain peace, trying to be the perfect husband, that I had forgotten how to prioritize myself. It was a harsh awakening, but it was necessary. One evening, Emily asked me to join her at a casual dinner with a few colleagues. The same pattern unfolded. She talked, others listened, and I smiled politely. But inside I had changed. I no longer felt desperate for her approval. I could exist in the space between us without fear, without tension, without that gnawing emptiness. And for some reason, that new confidence didn't go unnoticed. A week later, I ran into Ms. Bennett at a cafe in Capitol Hill. She recognized me immediately, greeted me warmly, and we shared a brief conversation about life, work, and the city. There was no tension, no unspoken expectation, just attention, presence, and genuine interest. It was astonishing how much a simple interaction could restore a sense of self-worth I had almost forgotten. It didn't mean I had abandoned Emily. I still cared about her. I still hoped we could reconnect. But I also understood something crucial. Connection cannot be forced. If someone chooses to see you as invisible, you cannot convince them otherwise by remaining silent or accommodating. Recognition must be mutual. Respect must be reciprocal. And love cannot thrive in the absence of attention. That night, lying in bed again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not happiness in the naive sense, not relief in avoidance, but peace in knowing I had reclaimed a part of myself. I didn't need approval. I didn't need validation. I just needed to be seen. And if Emily could not see me, then at least I knew I could exist fully in my own presence. In the end, the company party wasn't just a night of awkward conversations and forced smiles. It was a mirror showing me what had been missing all along. Sometimes it takes the smallest moments, the briefest glances of genuine attention, to remind you that you are worth more than being overlooked. Sitting beside someone who noticed me, even briefly, changed my perception of everything. And as for Emily, our marriage continued, but with a subtle shift. I no longer tried to force closeness where it had faded. I no longer let invisibility erode me. I had learned that being fully present in myself could be just as powerful as any shared laughter or long-held touch. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly undeniably seen.